prima che prenderà il microfono, però non si può.
Finish.
Yes?
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Can you please take your seats? We're about to start our session. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to welcome you to this event. Please take your seats. We're about to start. First of all, I would like to take the opportunity to thank all the donors whose generous support to this high-level segment has made the meeting possible. Next, please allow me to make a few housekeeping announcements. We kindly invite all of those participants to turn off their mobile phones to ensure that the meeting goes very smoothly. Please set them onto silent mode so as to ensure that we don't have any interruptions. For eligible participants, please be informed that the DSA can be collected next to the registration area. Make sure that you bring a copy of your passport and a copy of your plane tickets. Please also note that the emergency exits are located to your left-hand side and to your right-hand side, and at the back of the room where you enter the room. All participants should have already received a headset for the interpretation purposes as you came into the room. If you haven't done so, please make sure you collect a headset at the entrance. Interpretation will be offered in all 6 official UN languages, that is, Arabic, Chinese, French, Russian, and Spanish. And English will be the floor sound. During the discussions, please always use a table or a roaming microphone when taking the floor, and speak very slowly and clearly into the microphone to ensure that the interpreters can listen and follow you. I would also like to inform you that this event is being streamed online via YouTube. Please always, since we have a very limited time, and this is the key part, I would very kindly ask you to adhere to the time offered to all of you when you intervene. This would allow for as many of you as possible to take the opportunity to take the floor at the given time. I thank you all for your attention, and I now have the pleasure to invite Ms. Sylvia Nora Callins, President of the 10th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Stockholm Convention, to resume the meetings of the Conferences of the Parties on behalf of the Presidents of the Conferences of the Parties to the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretariat. Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished participants, dearest friends and colleagues. Welcome to the high-level segment of the 2021-2022 meetings of the Conferences of the Parties to the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions. It is a great pleasure to see so much interest and such a high participation in our event this afternoon, which is an indicator of the importance of chemicals and waste management for all of us. I would like to welcome all those ministers and high-level delegates who have taken time out of your busy schedules to join us for these important exchanges during the high-level segment. This high-level segment brings together the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Basel Convention, the 10th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Rotterdam Convention, and the 10th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Stockholm Convention. As done at previous meetings, when one of the presidents presides over a joint session, they do so on behalf of other two presidents. I now declare the 10th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Stockholm Convention resumed. On behalf of the President, Mr. Serge Molly Allo, the 10th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Rotterdam Convention is also resumed. Finally, on behalf of the President, Mr. Osvaldo Alvarez Perez, the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Basel Convention is also resumed. I would now like to invite Her Excellency Ms. Annika Strandhäll, Minister for Climate and the Environment of Sweden, to address the high-level segment. Excellency, you have the floor.
Good day, and dear ministers, UNEP Executive Secretary, distinguished guests, and colleagues. Let me start by thanking the Secretariat for the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions for arranging this high-level segment here in Sweden. It is a pleasure to welcome you all here in Stockholm, where not only the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment took place 50 years ago, but also the Stockholm Convention was adopted in 2001. The multilateral environmental agreements are one of many manifestations of all that we jointly have achieved since 1972. This week, we gather to celebrate those achievements at the Stockholm Plus 50 meeting. I see Stockholm Plus 50 as an opportunity for co-creation and multi-stakeholder approach to accelerate implementation in the coming decade in areas fundamental to a sustainable future. It is urgent to advance policies and partnerships for transitioning to a net zero pollution and nature-positive global economy. We all know that. And I am happy that we can gather here today to discuss the important role of the conventions in achieving a sound management of chemicals and waste and their contribution to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. The strong commitment among parties to continuously develop the conventions and thereby addressing our common challenges with chemicals and waste is necessary. Our societies need a green transition and sound management of chemicals and waste. Moving towards a non-toxic circular economy is a key priority for the Swedish government. Non-toxic material cycles are a precondition for the transition to a circular economy. Here, the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions play an essential role. The development of the Basel Convention clearly shows the commitment among parties to act and find solutions on the challenge with global waste. One example I would like to highlight is the decision to further restrict export of plastic waste, and that importing countries now has greater opportunities to stop import of unwanted plastic waste. The historic decision at UNEA 5 to initiate negotiations on a new international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution is a major achievement. I very much appreciate the ongoing work on plastic waste under the Basel Convention and believe this work can contribute to the negotiations on a new internationally legally binding instrument. Furthermore, we highly value that the Stockholm Convention contributes to global phase-out of the most hazardous and long-lived substances. The Stockholm Convention continues to evolve, with us as parties deciding on restrictions and bans of more and more chemicals, complex chemicals found in products that we all use in our daily lives. Two examples of this are, for example, flame retardants and perfluorinated substances. Finally, I would also like to mention that we need to promote ambitious actions at all levels in the upcoming framework for sound management of chemicals and waste beyond 2020. To facilitate this, Sweden and Uruguay together has initiated a high ambition alliance on chemicals and waste as a platform for dialogue and solution-oriented cooperation. And I am truly looking forward to the dialogue here today and to further identify how to address pollution, a life cycle approach, and successful implementation of the three conventions. Ministers, distinguished colleagues, thank you for joining us today, and once again, warm thanks to the Secretariat and a warm welcome to Stockholm. Good luck with fruitful discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. I would now like to invite Lisa Norona to speak on behalf of Ms. Inger Anderson, United Nations Under-Secretary and Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, to give the opening remarks. You have the floor.
Ms. Annika Strandhäll, Minister for Climate and Environment, Sweden. Maria-Elena Samedo, Deputy Director General of FAO. Madam Chair, Presidents of the BRS COPS, BRS Executive Secretary, Excellencies. I have great pleasure in conveying to you the message from Inga Anderson, who unfortunately could not be here this afternoon, but who wishes every success to this ministerial meeting. Friends, in a time of what can be called a great crisis, Stockholm Plus 50, a moment to reflect on where we go from here, because we know we require a system transformation to sustainability, but on how we get there quickly. The triple planetary crisis, climate change, nature and biodiversity loss, and pollution and waste, leaves us with little room to maneuver. There is a 50% chance that we will hit 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming in the next 5 years. Nature, as the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services has told us, is in unprecedented decline. The challenge of pollution cannot be separated out. It's a key driver of biodiversity loss. The sources of pollution are often the same as those that cause climate change. 1 in 6 deaths each year come from pollution. We must tap into the spirit of the 1972 Stockholm Conference, which declared that the just struggle of the peoples of all countries against pollution should be supported. Friends, the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm, or as we know it, BRS conventions, responded to this call. The BRS conventions embody the life cycle approach to the management of chemicals and waste, from prevention and minimization to restrictions and environmentally sound use to elimination and reuse and recycling. The work of the conventions is becoming even more important every day. According to the Stockholm Resilience Center, the production of chemicals has risen 50-fold since 1950 and is projected to triple again by 2050. It is in this context, good news that the Global Environmental Facility allocated 15% of funding to chemicals and waste management in its latest replenishment. My thanks. Friends, UNEP is committed to supporting the sound management of chemicals and waste and implementing the BRS conventions. And UNEA 5.2 delivered key resolutions that will help us pull all of this together. The Science Policy Panel on Chemicals and Waste and Pollution will be what IPBES is for biodiversity and IPCC is for climate. Close cooperation with the BRS conventions will be critical for this panel. UNEA Resolution 514 specifically promotes cooperation and coordination with regional and international conventions. The Basel Convention plastic waste amendments are a key example of where we can leverage the efforts and experience of an existing convention. The UNEA resolution on plastics, which the Minister just alluded to, is for a legally binding instrument to end plastic pollution, is also a big step forward. The ad hoc open-ended working group meeting in Dakar just concluded and has kick-started the work of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee. My ask to the committee was to learn from past processes, including in the chemicals and waste community, and to arrive at an ambitious international instrument. Cooperation with the BRS conventions will help deliver an agreement that can facilitate system change in an inclusive manner. We must also now deliver a new framework on sound management of chemicals and waste beyond 2020, work that the pandemic has delayed. In this regard, the fourth intersessional process, IP4 of SAICM, will be held at the end of August to resume deliberations towards the fifth international conference on chemicals management. We have the momentum to tackle the planetary crisis of pollution through the work of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm conventions, the expectations of a new global framework through the SAICM process, the call for the establishment of science policy platform, and the realization of a legally binding instrument on plastics. The theme chosen for the 2022 BRS COP couldn't be more appropriate: global agreements for a healthy planet, sound management of chemicals and waste. Friends, we share both a common goal and a common bond. Together, we have much work ahead of us to prevent, control, and manage pollution by hazardous chemicals and waste. And together, it is work we must do to improve human well-being, safeguard the integrity of the environment, and provide prosperity for all. Your presence here shows you're committed by carrying on this work to the BRS conventions and beyond. I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Noronha. I would now invite Ms. Maria Helena Semedo, Deputy Director General of the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, to provide her opening remarks. Please, Ms. Semedo, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. Excellencies, Mrs. Annika Strandhäll, Minister for Climate and Environment of Sweden, Honorable Ministers, distinguished Presidents of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention, my dear colleague and friend Ligia Noronha, representing Inger Andersson, Executive Secretaries, esteemed delegates, colleagues, and friends. On behalf of the Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, Dr. Chu Dong-gyu, it is my pleasure to join the other panelists welcoming you to this high-level segment of the Conference of the Parties to the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention. The sustainable management of chemicals and waste is a major cornerstone to the objectives set out in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Our theme today, Global Agreement for a Healthy Planet, Sound Management of Chemicals and Waste, is increasing in importance. We need a healthy planet to produce healthy food and reverse the growing trend of hunger and undernourishment in a world soon to reach 10 billion. This means our agri-food systems must become more efficient, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable to address our current global environment, health, and food security crisis. This is exactly what we are trying to achieve through the integrated One Health approach: healthy people, healthy environment, healthy animals, healthy plants, and healthy food. We must drive to move to sustainable consumption and production patterns and nature-positive solutions in order to have a climate-neutral, resilient, circular, and inclusive economies. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention are legally binding instruments of strategic importance to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. However, we are far off track. The number of hungry people around the world continues to increase, driven largely by conflict, the climate crisis, and economic fallout from COVID-19. Our natural resources, biodiversity, and the environment at large are degrading. For example, the use of agrochemicals is growing worldwide, with some highly hazardous pesticides seriously threatening human health and the environment. Up to 64% of agricultural land is at risk of pesticide pollution, and 34% at high risk. We need innovative approach to reduce air, water, and soil pollution, to minimize negative effects from chemical and waste, and to protect human health and the environment. This is the main objective of the three conventions. In 2021 alone, the Rotterdam Convention Secretariat provided technical assistance and information on integrated pest management, alternatives to hazardous pesticides, and sustainable agricultural practices to more than 140 countries. The Rotterdam Convention, jointly administered by FAO and UNEP, works to reduce the risk of hazardous pesticides and has specifically highlighted the vulnerable situation of children as well as gender-based risk. The work on the Rotterdam Convention is fully integrated in the Food and Agriculture Organization Strategic Framework 2022-31, which support the transformation of our agri-food system to support the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Given today's challenge, close cooperation at the highest level is urgently needed more than ever. I call upon all of us to renew and strengthen our commitment to the Convention and to ensure chemicals, pesticides, and waste feature right on the international agenda. We need to harness all opportunities to enhance the implementation of the conventions. We need bold and impactful political level decision. Thank you for your continued engagement, and I wish you all a very success in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Semedo. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, with these inspirational words from these opening speeches, I have the pleasure to inform you that we now have a video to continue with the opening ceremony and high-level segment this afternoon.
We got a systemic crisis because of the consumption and production patterns of our society. Chemicals, without any doubt, and this is what the scientists are telling us, chemical pollution is the biggest, by far, global environmental challenge, and we need to confront it in a very straightforward manner.
The Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions protect human health and the environment from dangerous chemicals and wastes. BRS represents ambitious synergies translating into practical progress on the ground.
plastic waste amendments is a decision taken at the international level binding to all parties of the Basel Convention to ensure that when they ship plastics for recycling, they do so only to countries with recycling facilities.
The Stockholm Convention now covers 30 persistent organic pollutants, and there are 52 chemicals under the Rotterdam Convention subject to prior informed consent. Now, the triple cups are our time. We have the power for real transformation.
We will be addressing a number of critical issues to advance the conventions. A list of a number of chemicals will be considered by the COPs for consideration on the Stockholm, also on the Rotterdam. And Basel has a heavy, heavy workload, not only on the plastics issue, on hazardous waste, on electronic waste.
Ladies and gentlemen, everything is of concern to everybody in our deeply interdependent world today. The iron rule remains. Our world is one, inseparable, and interdependent. It is this world that is threatened by the impact of man's unplanned, selfish, and ever-growing activities.
Starting in Stockholm, as we commemorate 50 years where the United Nations Environment Program was born and where the power of people changed history, today the actions we take matter. We can contribute to global goals, ensuring a healthy planet for the prosperity of all.
For this transformation to happen, we need to have everybody on board. And what I mean by that is the politicians, the policymakers, the private sector, but also the individual.
Everybody needs to jump in right now because we're not facing a challenge only for the planet. The planet is going to survive with climate change and global warming and plastic in the oceans is that humanities and human economies will not.
We need your leadership as we focus our discussions on addressing pollution to protect people and the planet, embracing the life cycle approach at a national level, and enhancing means of implementation. We all have the human right to life, to health, and to a clean and sustainable environment. We are counting on you.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, dear friends and colleagues, good afternoon. And once again, I join others in welcoming you to the beautiful city of Stockholm. My name is Rolf Payet, and I'm the Executive Secretary of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. And before entering into the ministerial interactive discussions, I would like to convey my thanks to the government of Sweden for the excellent organization of the Stockholm Plus 10 meeting, and indeed this event this afternoon, and for allowing our high-level segment to be held in connection with such a historic event, which, as you all know, started or was spurred by the extent of pollution happening around the world at the time. Excellencies, you have heard and you have seen it. We need ambition, we need strong targets, and we need collaboration and cooperation. This is why we are gathering here today. The sound management of chemicals is essential to solve the three planetary crises that we are facing today. With this energy, let us get right into the discussions. In the interactive discussion number 1, we'll be looking at opportunities for addressing the three planetary crises through the implementation of the Basel, Stockholm, and Rotterdam Conventions. The interactive session discussion number 2 will address what the conventions can offer for moving forwards towards a life cycle approach to chemicals and waste. And last but not least, the interactive session number 3, you will get a chance to consider opportunities for enhancing the implementation of the three conventions through new and clean, innovative technologies, but also innovative approaches to financing. The interactive discussions will be organized as follows. Each discussion is scheduled to have a duration of 40 minutes, so we don't have a lot of time. Following a short introduction by the moderator, each panelist will be given a 3-minute statement, and I urge our panelists to please be short and brief. And thereafter, the moderator will open the floor for ministers to make an intervention, and the minister will call the name of the country to make the intervention. We will try to accommodate your preferences, but as you know, we have a very tight schedule and a tight time, and I know some of you are very eager to deliver statements, but unfortunately, as you can see, it will not be possible given the very short time that we have. So please forgive us if you do not get the chance to deliver a statement this afternoon. The outcome of this high-level segment will be a non-negotiated summary of key messages from 3 discussions. My staff are doing their best to capture your interventions so that we can present the summary at the end of this segment. And to support this process, you have been invited as well to provide key messages to us in advance, and I wish to express my appreciation to those countries that have submitted to us their key messages. So without any further ado, please allow me to introduce the distinguished minister and moderator of the first interactive discussion, Her Excellency Dr. Yasmin Fouad, who is the Minister of Environment of Egypt and also the host of the next UNFCCC COP. Excellency, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paye. It's a pleasure to moderate today's first discussion on opportunities for addressing the 3 planetary environmental crises through the implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention. I would like to start by welcoming His Excellency, Mr. Vag Patrons Miller, the Minister of Environment and Natural Resources of the Bahamas. Welcome, Mr. Miller. Also, Her Excellency, Ms. Sherry Rahman, Minister for Climate Change, Pakistan. Welcome. And Dr. Bettina Hoffman, the Parliamentary State Secretary at the Federal Minister for the Environment, Nature, Conservation, Nuclear Safety and Consumer Protection of Germany. Welcome on our panel. And last but not least, Her Excellency Ms. Zakia Khatibi, Federal Minister for Climate, Environment, Sustainable Development and Green Deal, Belgium. We'll try to manage that in 45 minutes, so please help me and support me in doing that. Your Honorable Minister Miller, you was a parliamentary secretary for the Ministry of Social Services and Urban Renewal. He's a veteran broadcaster, a former trade unionist and a social activist, and the founder and the CEO of the motivational organization, the Vision Group. He was elected in 2017 as the member of the parliament for the Golden Isles constituency and re-elected in 2021 and appointed to serve as a cabinet minister for the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Your Excellency, it's a pleasure to have you with us on this panel. What are the challenges from your perspective for attaining the objective of the 3 convention, Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm, at the global, regional, and sub-regional and national level? And how do you see we can overcome those challenges shortly? Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Firstly, I should like to bring
首先，我要向大会代表我们的总统还有巴哈马人民致意，然后介绍一下我的这个背景。巴哈马位于佛罗里达南部，而且离古巴有150公里。大概有10万平方英里，我们有700多个岛，有18个是没有人住的。如果把这个大小合在一起的话，那大概就上千平方英里。我们有9万4千多平方英里的这个海洋和水域。 在这个背景下，我先引用一下巴哈马致力于减少和消除污染，并且不使用有毒的。
I'm pleased to announce today that our country has completed our national implementation plan and currently in motion to updating our plan. As you know, this convention began with listing some 12 of those chemicals known as the Dirty Dozen. In 2009, added 9, and then since 2017, 16 or more have been added. Some of the challenges that we face, we're an archipelago, and our islands stretches out as I announced. And so in terms of dispersing information, it's challenging for us because some of the territories are remote and out of distance. And so it becomes very challenging. And also the challenge of resources. We are part of the small island developing states where we've contributed least to this global mess. But in this present trajectory and trend, we may suffer the most. If it continues, our people will be climate refugees. And so finances is extremely important. We've survived the Holocaust of enslavement. We've survived colonialism. And now we're faced with climate change. And for us, an indomitable people, a resilient people, to survive climate change. So the challenge is great. It's a tremendous challenge. But in terms of for us, on the international stage, globally, for us, locally, for us, nationally, those are some of the challenges we face, and we've come to the convention, and we've come to get the greatest amount of assistance that we can get to assist us. And so I hope I would have answered your question. But
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Miller. Just to pick up on what you mentioned, three important things that, first of all, your country's commitment to handle the three conventions and your international commitment in that by fulfilling the national implementation plan. Two important challenges you mentioned, one related to information exchange and dispersing information, and information should be there at a timely manner. And the second most important one is resources and finance. Without resources and finance, you will not be able to fulfill your commitment that you made on yourself and your country and implement the plan itself, the national implementation plan.
And also there's a commitment
Okay.
that to reach out, to get our young people actively involved. Because my generation is, in the preamble of our Constitution, we talk about inheritors and successors. I inherited and succeeded. And for generations behind me, they will inherit, they will succeed. And it will be in a much worse condition on this present trend. And so we want to inform them as much as we can, to get them involved as much as we can, so that they can continue to be a part of this fight against climate change.
That's very interesting for giving us those insights on the opportunities for overcoming the challenge. Is the young people the game changer into that? Now I would like to hear from Minister Rahman. Excellency Rahman is a former diplomat and a member of the Senate of Pakistan since 2015. She was the first female leader of the opposition in the Senate from March to August 2018 and served as Pakistan's ambassador to the United States from 2011 to 2013, and she's currently serving as the Federal Minister for the Ministry of climate change. Your Excellency, how can sound management of chemicals and waste and the objectives of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm conventions be included in the national implementation plans and integrated into the national development strategies? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's an excellent initiative that we have because of these three conventions. Waste management, hazardous and otherwise, at least elevated to a position of global conversations. Here we were talking this morning about how biodiversity and nature was a poor cousin of climate change in international conferences. I've just come from Davos and that's all they were talking about. Waste management, if biodiversity comes second, waste management is a real poor relative of all of the above. And I think this conversation is important because in context to Madam Minister, your question about how to integrate waste management, this is one of the challenges that should not need a moral imperative behind it. People from simply cleaning their backyards in a national sense or to a local sense don't need too much motivation. It impacts human health, it impacts the food we eat, the water we drink, and the air we breathe. Those are the triple crises also in one way or the other. And in shorthand, what I'd like to say is national action plans need to be aligned better with these three conventions. And they can be aligned only if we don't address the problem in sectoral silos. We need to come out of global, national, provincial, and municipal and institutional silos. We address many of our problems and existential ones in boxes. Even in one country, you'll have a federation addressing major crises, including pollution and waste management and hazardous waste, as part of a linear, boxed-in effort. So that's the first challenge. And I also want to ask a key question, which may be answered by climate lawyers who drafted this convention, that when you're taking prior permission to transport hazardous material to a country that is looking or willing and able to recycle. And believe me, South Asian economies, and I'm from Pakistan, are real masters at recycling because we don't like to waste anything. Poor people have always a second or third or fourth life of every product. They want to reinvent not because they can, because they can't afford to replace new things, and therefore our lifestyles are less carbon intensive. When you're dumping or selling something to a country for recycling, yes, the prior information has been exchanged, permission has been taken. Do we even know if that country actually, down the ladder of its recycling cycle, can actually manage the whole chain of recycling, or is it just saying so and expecting to put a certain and a large percentage of it in already festering landfills that are a risk to human civilization? And of course, the water. I also want to speak to how we use these conventions to build national action plans. I think they're very useful. They sober the minds of governments that are distracted by multiple, other crises and climate crises, in which I include all of them. Do sober the minds. I mean, I'm from Pakistan right now, and the geolocation is one of the hottest places on earth. That is where we're situated for 3 years running. Pakistan is home to the hottest urban dwellings on this planet. And this year we crossed 51 degrees, which is quite uninhabitable. We also face water scarcity by 2025. So, and a home to some of the largest, in fact, the most glacial mountains and peaks outside the polar region, which are melting because of the unprecedented heat waves. Now, if we are using the word unprecedented a lot in our public conversations. The country is stunned. They're stunned at what just happened. We have flash floods, droughts, and half the country is under drought, desertification, arid, food security hugely impacted, including the mangoes we export. And we then are looking at multiple compounded crises in one long country, irrigated by a very long, one of the largest rivers in the world, like the Nile, it's the Indus. And here we are looking at these conventions to build national action plans, which then at least guide us and our governments to build synergies between all the three, the pollution, the biodiversity, and the climate crisis, and understand that when we are developing as a country, and we don't always have the leapfrog money, resources, or technology that my colleague from the Honorable Minister from Bahamas mentioned, what goes on is the passing on of responsibility to other communities, to especially in riverine cultures. This will go downstream. So annual global dumping of plastics and waste is finding its way not to recycling. Only 30% of, say, the world's industrial waste is recycled, only 30%. And it's able to generate about 410 from storage, from all the way down to recycling, from collection to recycling. It's a huge industry, but less than 30% of it's being recycled. The rest is going into our oceans and landfills. And these conventions are addressing it, but we also need to address something simple. The circular economy is something we talk about. There's another circular economy, the reverse circular economy, going on as we speak. And that is that 90% of our plastics, the plastic bags, the single-use plastic bottles, that are ending up in our oceans and on our coastlines. 90% of those microplastics are being consumed by the fish and the marine life we all eat. They land up in your in your cod or your sea fish. They're back in your plate. That is how it is circulating back to you and to us, and not just polluting and our coastlines, our coral reefs, but they are now poisoning the marine life we eat. The mercury poisoning is very high. The hazardous chemical poisoning is very high. So these industries are huge. They're making a lot of money, but they're not recycling it back into sustainable recycling. Very quickly, I want to say South Asia and Pakistan's per capita is low. But we need to recycle smartly, and the conventions need to address where they dump and which countries can actually sustainably recycle. Thank you.
Thank you. Very quickly, you mentioned the national action plans aligned with the development plans in a multi-stakeholder integrated approach at all levels, and stressed the importance of recycling versus annual global dumping, how that recycling is related to the green jobs and to the economy, and how best can we do that, and that would solve the challenges that we have. Dr. Hoffman is the Parliamentary State Secretary of the Federal Ministry for Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety and Consumer Protection, has been a member of the German Bundestag since 2017, and you're part of the Parliamentary Friendship Group for Relation with the Ant State. Your Excellency, how do you see the relationship between the chemical pollution, biodiversity loss, and climate change, and how can the convention help to reduce that triple planetary crisis? And I'm sorry to give you only 4 minutes for that, so that we can get on others. Thank you, Your Excellency. The floor is yours, Doctor.
Excellencies, colleagues and friends, I mean, without responsible chemicals and waste management, many of the SDGs of the 2030 Agenda cannot be achieved. For instance, clear water, clean air, and protected ecosystems. There is no doubt that the three multilateral environmental agreements on chemicals and waste make a vital contribution to tackling the global triple crisis. For example, these agreements helped uphold the ban on persistent pollutions and inform people about the risks and safe management for particularly hazard chemicals. Equally important, however, are the Minamata Convention on Mercury, the strategic approach to international chemicals management, and chemicals have a significant impact on biodiversity. One of the early warnings concerning chemical pollution was Rachel Carson's famous book, Silent Spring. This book describes how hazardous pesticides can be for the biodiversity in agricultural settings. And we know that chemicals can strongly impact the climate. One example are HFCs. HFCs were developed to replace CFCs because CFCs destroy the ozone layer. HFCs save the ozone layer, however, at the same time, they are very powerful greenhouse gases. It was therefore urgent to further developing the rules of the Montreal Protocol in order to reduce these HFCs. In future, we have to advance implementation of all conventions on chemicals and waste. Developing countries in particular have to catch up, and they need help in building their capacities, national legislation and institutions. Here I see major implementation gaps. The example of PCBs make clear how urgently action is needed. Already it is apparent that the deadlines under the Stockholm Convention cannot be met. I mean here ending the use of PCBs by 2025 and environmentally sound management of PCB waste by 2028. If we want to maintain the credibility of the Stockholm Convention, we must step up our game here. At the Conference of the Parties in 2 weeks' time, I hope that we start a discussion on this and develop suitable strategies. And we must also remember that chemicals have many positive and intended effects that are needed for the transformation for the 2030 agenda. One example are medicines, which benefit the health, but are also a source of environmental pollution. Often, chemicals are part of the solution for greater sustainability, but we have to handle them with care. And chemical safety is also a matter of justice. This aspect is particularly important to me. Around the world, it is the poorest and most vulnerable who suffer the most from the environmental pollution. The number of deaths and illness caused by chemicals is highest among these groups. And finally, let me say, Germany will host the 5th International Conference on Chemicals Management in Bonn to discuss the strategic approach to international chemical management and the Beyond 2020 instrument. I look forward to seeing you all at the ICCM 5 in Bonn, I hope next year.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hofmann. It's really a pleasure. And thanks for raising up the need for the developing countries to be helped, the need for putting a target for the end of the PCBs, and the need for dealing seriously with the conventions of the chemical and waste to stop the pollution and stop the real triplet laundry crisis that's happening right now. Your Excellency, Minister Khatibi, Federal Minister for Climate, Environment, Sustainable Development and Green Deal at Belgium, how can the full implementation of the convention effectively address the triple planetary crisis? You have 4 minutes, Your Excellency. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, dear friends. One of the main triggers of environmental crisis is the unsound management of chemicals and waste. Chemical and waste pollution has the potential to cause severe ecosystem and human health problems at different scales, but also to alter vital Earth system process on which human life depends. And let me refer to the recent scientists' announcement that the 5th out of 9 planetary boundary was exceeded regarding novel entities. And in this context, a full and global implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions will be crucial in resolving this issue. Let me start with the Stockholm Convention, which provides an important contribution to tackling the global plastic waste crisis by banning or restricting various POPs used in plastics as additives or flame retardants. The Rotterdam Convention, on the other hand, offers the necessary guidance to countries in their fight against biodiversity loss and environmental pollution. In regulating the transboundary movements of waste, the Basel Convention also contributes to a more clean environment for us and the generations to come. Let us take full advantage of these tools by submitting new chemicals candidates and by listing all chemicals recommended by the scientific committees. Hence, these three conventions are key regulatory instruments to act on a global scale against the harmful effects of chemicals, to reach the objective of a toxic-free environment and to shape the desirable future for us and the next generations to come. In line with the Vision One World, One Health, the full implementation of these international standards should help us attain the highest possible level of health and environmental protection while limiting double standards and ensuring a level playing field for economics actors. Before ending, I would seize the opportunity to recall my support to ban the exportation of hazardous chemicals that are not allowed in the European Union because of their environmental and health concern, but are still exported outside the EU. And finally, I'm pleased with the new phase of discussion of the conferences of the parties to the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Convention. It gives us a great opportunity to increase the contribution of this convention to the transition to safe and sustainable chemistry and also to accelerate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Minister. I'll now give the floor to a list of speakers from their excellencies, the ministers from the floor, 2 minutes for each so that we can wrap up. I'll start with Azerbaijan, Mr. Raf Hijavi, the Deputy Minister of Ecology and Natural Resources in Azerbaijan. The floor is yours. 2 minutes, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, I should like to express our gratitude to the Secretariat of the Basel, Stockholm and Rotterdam Conventions for organizing this very important meeting. I should also like to thank the host country, Sweden, for their very warm hospitality and extensive support. Unfortunately, pollution is going from strength to strength around the world. The use of dangerous chemicals is having a negative impact on the environment, and this at a global scale. This is threatening the oceans, the soils, and also human life. It's an open secret that industry, construction, agriculture, and the health sector, all of these industries are using all sorts of chemicals, newly synthesized ones, which are not found in nature. This is very dangerous for our environment. However, there are also innovative approaches drawing on chemicals science, which can help us to address the issue of environmental pollution. They have a lot of potential. We can tackle global environmental issues if we adopt an ecosystem-based approach, ensuring that we use energy and resources as little as possible. Azerbaijan supports the various initiatives that have been put forward, specifically the Environmental Protection Conventions. A healthy environment and green growth are priorities for us for the next decade. In keeping with the strategic document we've adopted, Azerbaijan 2030, national priorities for social and economic development. As things stand, managing plastic waste and minimizing the impact of such waste on the environment is our top priority. Last year, Azerbaijan banned plastic bags of a thickness less than 15 microns. We've also banned single-use plastics. Distinguished colleagues, waste and hazardous chemicals management calls for innovative, sustainable decisions. We need to upend our existing consumption and production models, the future of the international conventions, and our ability to neutralize toxic chemicals and wastes hinges on us changing the approach we adopt to tackling such problems. We need to introduce innovative technologies which can help us to manage such waste, and we also need to look for alternatives to these hazardous chemicals. Thank you.
Excellency Ms. Terry Lehtonen, the State Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Finland. The floor is yours. I ask you, my dear sister, to have only 2 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, earlier this year, leading scientists concluded that as humanity, we have surpassed yet another planetary boundary, the level of chemical pollution that the environment can handle. As the global consumption and production of chemicals continues to grow, we need to urgently step up our actions. As we all know, pollution is identified as one of the main drivers of biodiversity loss. Chemicals and waste management are also relevant in tackling climate change. The sound management of chemicals and waste will also support the implementation of Paris Agreement, as well as biodiversity-related conventions and many of the SDGs. Today's discussion has been very clear. Work under the auspices of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention is crucial in tackling the planetary crisis. It is important to look at these challenges and solutions in a synergistic way in order to address them effectively. Finland has led a project by the Nordic Council of Ministers in collaboration with UNEP that focuses on finding options for action to strengthen collaboration and coordination between biodiversity and chemicals and waste clusters, with a special focus on the national level. One of the key findings of the study was the need to enhance national coordination among focal points of the different MEAs. National actions to increase integration when implementing the MEAs, for example, consideration of how biodiversity is addressed in national planning relating to chemicals and waste, or how the implementation of MEAs is considered in national development plans, are strongly encouraged. Finally, I believe that the future science policy panel on chemicals, waste, and pollution will provide us an important opportunity to increase knowledge and understanding also on the nexus between the challenges we are discussing today. It is important to ensure coherent collaboration of this future panel with the IPCC and the IPBS. We need to pull on all the levers to tackle the triple planetary crisis together. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much. Mr. Nasser Yassin, Minister of Environment, Lebanon.
Oh, sorry. I just would like to apologize on behalf of Mr. Nasser Yassin. He was not able to make it to the conference, and therefore there will be no statement for Lebanon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Burkina Faso, Ms. Maminata Terraro, Minister de l'Environnement, de l'Énergie, de l'eau, for Burkina Faso. Not available. And from the Maldives, Ms. Amina Shona, the Minister of Environment, Climate Change and Technology. Maldives, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Minister. Honorable Ministers, Ambassadors. The Maldives is a very large ocean state. We are also a very climate vulnerable country. We also face a big problem of waste, particularly marine pollution that is connected to plastic pollution. The increase in usage of toxic chemicals put pressure on our environment, risking coral reef biodiversity, ocean health, and human lives. In the Maldives, the major users of chemicals are construction, agriculture, and healthcare sectors. However, these sectors also offer immense opportunities for reducing chemicals and waste by implementing innovative approaches such as circular economy. Waste generated from healthcare sectors sometimes generate waste that are challenging to manage in our country, given the geographical nature of island nations. The quantity of plastic and microplastic debris in the marine environment is a growing concern for our country. Marine litter and microplastics pose threats to our fisheries and coral reefs. Plastics in various forms impact our lives. To help address these issues, The Maldives is fully committed to phasing out single-use plastics by 2023. We've initiated implementation of single-use plastics phase-out plan in the year 2020, and today we are marking an immense milestone against plastic pollution in our country. Beginning today, plastic pollution prevention and implementation under the plan, we are implementing a nationwide production and sales of ban of single-use plastics. With this plan, a total of 13 types of single-use plastic items will be gradually banned by the end of 2023. Undoubtedly, the BRS Convention provides the technical guidance and the necessary frameworks for the management of chemicals and hazardous waste in an environmentally sound manner. It is necessary to continually review the guidelines and processes to ensure that they meet the current needs and circumstances of the parties. We must work to ensure that the BRS Convention adapt to the technological changes as well as emerging issues and priorities. We must also strive to identify and provide means to assist parties to implement the guidelines nationally. The future success of the BRS Convention depends on the transformation in the agricultural production and industries. We must embrace innovative waste management technologies and alternatives to harmful chemicals. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Minister. Mr. Pei, the floor is yours, but before doing so, I would like to thank very much the panelists. Thank you very much for your contribution, for making my job easy by abiding to the time, and for the speakers, my fellow colleagues and friends, Ministers of Environment. Mr. Pei, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, Minister Fouad. Thank you for this excellent panel. I think we've heard some great inspiring messages as well as points. And as we change the panel setting here, I'd like to invite you to please proceed this way so that the new team can come in this way. Yes, can we have the new panel coming up? Yes, thanks. So we will now turn directly to the interactive ministerial panel number 2. And before we get there, as everybody sets up the podium here, I would just like to provide just a few minor points that, major points that were raised by ministers this afternoon, sorry, once again. I think first there was the engagement of the youth. I think that was an important outcome of the discussions just now, the importance of recycling and engaging with industry, the importance of an ecosystem-based approach when dealing with chemicals and wastes, the importance of creating green jobs, and of course highlighting the biodiversity impacts related to this. I will come back to the key messages later on, but just to give a very short summary of what was said just now. It is my pleasure now to invite and introduce distinguished Minister, Vice Minister of the Czech Republic and moderator of the second discussion, Mr. Jan Dusík. Mr. Jan Dusík is the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Environment of the Republic of Czech Republic. And the Czech Republic is also host to the Stockholm Convention Regional Center for Capacity Building and Technology Transfer based in Brno. Mr. Dusík, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Payet. It's a great pleasure to moderate today's discussion on opportunities offered by the implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions for moving towards a life cycle management of chemicals and waste. And I would like to welcome the 3 members of the panel of ministers, starting on my right with His Excellency Mehmet Emin Birpinar, the Deputy Minister of Environment, Urbanization and Climate Change of Turkey. Welcome. His Excellency Dr. Kwaku Afriye, the Minister of Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation of Ghana. Welcome. And finally, His Excellency Mr. Nelson Adrian Peñarobena, Minister of Environment of Uruguay. Welcome. Before I will ask each of you to deliver your brief panel remarks, let me just offer 3 remarks from my own perspective from the Czech Republic. We believe that one of the prerequisites of the life cycle approach is the strict compliance with the waste hierarchy that paves the way towards implementing the 3 conventions together in an efficient manner. We also believe that suitable alternatives are not always easy to find, but we must keep that attention and that pressure, and we must listen to science, and the conventions have their scientific bodies, and we should, in taking our decisions, we should listen to that scientific advice. And the third and last comment from me would be that as the Czech Republic will, in 1 month from now, enter the presidency of the European Union, the agenda of chemicals and waste will also be part of our program, looking at the waste shipment, looking at biodegradable waste, packaging waste, the new legislation on chemical substances like the classification, labeling and packaging, and the amendment of the REACH legislation in the European Union, plus the global agenda, which, among other things, includes the negotiations of the new plastic treaty. So even though the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Convention COP will be happening this month, there is also a busy program for the second half of this year. Without further ado, I would now turn to our panelists, and we will start with His Excellency Mr. Peñarobena. He has a long-standing career in politics and was first appointed as the First Minister of Environment in 2020, when his portfolio was separated from the Ministry of Housing and Territorial Planning. And I would like to ask you, Excellency, what are the challenges and opportunities to establish mechanisms and institutions to implement a life cycle approach for the sound management of chemicals and waste? Por favor.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to participate representing my country, Uruguay, that has carried out extreme measures in this issue. We are at the central region, and we are very interested in what we are discussing today. Chemical management is something that we use every day, what we eat, what we transport, and the different areas of our environment. So this is the foundation of the solution that we have to find. The life cycle approach gives us an outlook to know where the substances come from and how they should be finally gotten rid of. We need to be aware of the challenges that a region is facing, whether it's a question of medicine, chemicals, or industrial waste. I believe that the conference that has brought us together here has given us the tools that have to do with best practices, environmental practices, and the guidelines to do with the best environmental practices and the available techniques available. How we can come up with norms on control of emissions and everything that has to do with a register for chemicals and different pesticides. This is of great importance. Not forgetting technical and capacity building at local level that will allow us to control and have continued assessment of different products. A very important example is lead acid batteries, where we have a circular economy where we are able to use not only the lead but also the plastic, and this is a challenge that we have to consider in the use of the waste and managing emissions, especially if the waste that is produced is dangerous. So how do we use the dangerous waste into raw materials for something else? In Uruguay, we do not have the recycling mechanisms, so we have to export it. And this is a huge challenge because it increases our costs, and the maritime options for us are few. So we'd like to increase competitiveness in the region with neighboring countries so that with low costs, we are able to deal with this with reduced risk and with high capacity. What is of great importance today, and this, I see I only have 1 second left, we have to be aware of what lies ahead of us, compliance. And this has to call our attention. Countries, in this case, my country, have taken a commitment to action. And as has been said earlier, we have seen a retraction in decision making. And this is important. I underscore. Let us save the planet, but not just the planet, but the life of the planet. And this requires less of me, but more of us. We cannot be selfish. Let us not forget that what will disappear is humanity, not the planet.
Thank you very much, Excellency. I think you brought a wonderful example of how the chemicals are part of our lives and on the batteries and what happens with them and how to make use of the materials in a sustainable way requires to make these connections. Thank you again. Let me move to the next speaker, and that's Professor Dr. Mehmet Emin Birpinar, who has a long-standing career in the public service and is the Deputy Minister at the Ministry of Environment and Urbanization in Turkey since 2018. Professor Birpinar was also the President of the Barcelona Convention Bureau for the 18th meeting of its contracting parties. And in addition, he's also the Special Envoy on Climate Change of the Republic of Turkey. So, Professor Birpinar, how could the national legislation for implementing the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions be built up and enforced?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President, for this very interesting question. And then I would like to express my gratitude to the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Convention Secretariat and the Swedish government for hosting this important event. The pollution. So as Turkey, and we now, that is already done, we never say Turkey, we say Turkey. So this is, for the United Nations, it is already approved. So we continue our promising process in the management of hazardous chemicals and their wastes. First of all, important steps have been taken in our country. We ban and restrict all persistent organic pollutants listed under the Stockholm Convention in our country, and eliminate their waste and legacies, and also to reduce their emissions and release to the environment. For instance, we are happy to say that one of the highest volume of persistent organic pollutants, we call it POPs, stockpiles, is eliminated in our country. So the details of our work in POP stockpiles will be shared in the upcoming COP, Conference of Parties event in Geneva next week. So secondly, after the Basel and Stockholm and Rotterdam conventions, our country has also become a party to the Minamato Convention this year. So regarding the national implementation plans and development strategies on sound management of chemicals and waste, we are following the latest developments of BRS conventions, and we reflect the latest decisions taken by COPs in our national legislations and plans. So we are preparing and updating our national implementation plan for POPs And also we developed various legislative frameworks for management of chemicals also accordingly. So we also believe in the importance of transforming the definition and perception of waste from the end of a product to an opportunity for an economical transformation. So we have taken many important steps in this field. So our zero waste project, for example, carried under the leadership of our First Lady, Her Excellency Madam Emine Erdogan. This project is a good example to the national ownership of the BRS agenda. With this project, recycling rate has increased from 13% to 27% in 5 years' time. So we are targeting to increase this rate to 35% in 2023, so next year. So we give particular importance to the policies and actions to combat plastic pollution also. The importance of mixed plastic waste has been prohibited already coming from the European countries. So we are importing this mix. We have been importing this mixed plastic waste from the European countries after the China banned already this importation. So, but I mean, we banned that, I mean, the mixed ones cannot come to our country. Only the normal separated ones, the paper, the plastics and the others can come, but not the mixed one already. So the plastic waste amendments to the annexes of the Basel Convention have been implemented in Turkey since 2021, and the contamination of imported plastic waste is limited to 1%. I mean, this is also important, and the quota of 50% of annual recycling capacity of the importer has been introduced for non-hazardous waste. So one company has a capacity of, let's say, 100%, only 50% can import from abroad, and 50% should be collected in Turkey. That is very important. So we also strongly believe that the life cycle management concept, but that's also important because we use this waste as an input also. That is very important, so we use it. But it's, of course, too many criticizations are coming from media and from the NGOs that Turkey is becoming the center of the imported waste from after China. So we are also working on this. We say that this is not a waste, but this is the important input for the production of the certain material. So accordingly, we have initiated preparation work for the National Circular Economy Action Plan. We will develop circular economy political framework. This will affect whole economy and society. We will include all stakeholders such as academia, private sector, and civil society also. So we are supporting the establishment of a specific convention for plastics under UNEP. We proposed this one years ago, but we are happy to hear that the specific convention for plastics under UNEP is very crucial, very important. We strongly support this also. And international collaboration is also very important. And finally, of course, this hazardous waste and everything, not only this one, but we have to understand that the former generations before us, I remember that my grandfather, when we were collecting cherries, for example, from the garden, and he didn't use any chemical for the cherries. And I used to ask him when I was a child, why we are not using, because the neighbors, they are using too many chemicals and they get too many cherries from the cherries. We get maybe 1/3 of what they get. He says, we have to think about the rights of the others. We have to think about the rights of all the other living things, not only the human being. So he was a literate man, but he was illiterate, but he was an environmentally literate person. So we have to come back and see. So education is important, But environmental education, environmental literacy is more important than everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And again, you raised a very practical, real-life experience, but also showing how the conventions can serve as an instrument for tackling the national issues combined with the global markets. And I think on the issue of importing the waste and further recycling in Turkey, I think you made a good example. Thank you. Let me turn to the last of the panelists, and we would like to hear from His Excellency Dr. Kwaku Afriyie, who is a Member of Parliament representing the people of Sefi Wiavso constituency of the Western North region of the Republic of Ghana. Dr. Kwaku Afriyie is a medical doctor by profession, but he's also a cocoa and nutmeg farmer. Excellency, please share with us your thoughts.
Thank you very much. There's so much to say about, recycle issues and then the chemical pollution under the BRS Convention. But so I will stick strictly to the Ghanaian situation. I realize that in order to promote the elimination or solution of these problems, there are 5 categorical areas that, in my experience, should apply. First, government commitment. And then, of course, the circular economy approach framework should apply. It's not as if the circular economy framework has just been discovered. It's always been applicable in nature. Anybody who deviates from that, it portends a big problem for the rest of humanity. And then, of course, we have to adopt a sub-regional collaborative approach. And then we have to have institutional strengthening and then legislation. And what I bring to this table is that we must, in the Ghanaian situation, it is the poor and vulnerable who hold the key to some of the solutions we are discussing. If you take the plastic industry, for example, along the value chain, from the collectors through to those who carry them to the factory floor, they were among the poor and vulnerable in our society. So if we do not solve the problem of illiteracy, which is a twin problem too, and the poverty gap, they do not break from it, everything that we are discussing here will come to naught because they are the majority. So within the government commitment, for example, we have to enact suitable legislation and make sure that they are enforced. And in the plastic situation in Ghana, we are doing exactly that. In fact, as soon as I get back to Ghana, we are going to launch, and we've actually gone through a process. We have the national policy in place on plastics. I'm using plastics only as an example. We have similar values on base metals, on what do you call it, the e-waste, and so on and so forth. We are even circularity, we are extending it to wood and other products. But the plastics is the prime. So we have systems in place which make sure that we are going to expand, the capacity issues are going to be dealt with, and then there are nuances. The models that we are using now, the cash for collection is not enough. We have what we call orphan plastics. You guys call it under 20 microns, or I heard under 50 microns now. We have to look at legislation and have to make sure that we put systems in place that we do. We are looking at a preventive approach where we are going to grade our country into grades. And we adopt a policy of not seeing any plastics in those grades. And you will be rewarded accordingly. Not so much by the weight of what you collect, but in addition, the reward system will take account of plastics not seen. But those details we hear, I'm sure that I'm behind time. So I will pause here and say that for me, listening around, a lot of the ideas have been thrown out here. We have them. But the poverty issue, the vulnerable people, we have to bring them on board. Otherwise, we are doomed to fail. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your important comment at the end of your remark, bringing the people along, especially the poor and vulnerable people, and looking at the circular economy approaches. Let me now turn to other ministers who wanted to intervene on this panel session. There's a 2-minute limit for those interventions. And first I would invite from Georgia, Ms. Nino Tandilashvili, the Deputy Minister of Environmental Protection and Agriculture. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to be here today, and of course I would like to thank the government of Sweden for the wonderful organization of today's meeting. We all understand that sustainable development means not only fulfilling certain commitments, but also developing a new vision and approaches for the socio-economic development, which is unthinkable without cooperation and sharing of experience between the countries. Georgia, of course, is a party of all 3 conventions and considers the implementation of those conventions as extremely important. Of course, we take important steps and implement international projects which significantly contribute to the implementation of 3 conventions. It is also important to note that respective national regulations are periodically updated to be reflective of the conventions and other international environmental requirements. And I will try to just inform you about the recent developments, which is very important and which also is important for the development of circular economy. Since signing the association agreement, we started an active work in terms of developing national waste management system. And recently we started the development of circular economy strategy with an active involvement of the businesses, civil society organizations, also the active citizen groups. This will allow us, of course, to introduce modern approaches of waste management as well as innovative technologies and support the new investments and, for sure, additional job creation. The country has actually started the implementation of extended producers' responsibility system, which is quite a new approach for Georgia and is considered as a key financial and economic instrument which promote the implementation of waste management schemes and the development of resource-efficient economy. We have already taken the first steps for the implementation of EPR system, and this new approach will support better involvement of businesses in the sustainable waste management. Of course, separate collection of waste and reduction of environmental pollutions. Still, of course, we face challenges related to the safe waste and chemical management. There is a need for further support and also to involve the private sector more in the process, which is very important for the effective enforcement of waste management systems, as well as implementing the international requirements and the requirements of all 3 conventions to ensure the safe and healthy environment of the citizens. Thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you very much for your remarks. Let me now turn to His Excellency Mr. Bhupender Yadav, the Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change in the government of India. Sir.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the impact of chemical and waste on environment and human health have underlined the need for having sustainable approaches. Lifestyle management of chemical involving take action at the production, use and disposal stage. The BRS conventions need to synchronize approach to address the complete life cycle of identified chemicals. The major challenge in lifestyle management of chemical and waste are access and availability of technologies, cost of technologies, lack of awareness among stakeholders, and limited institutional capacities. Shift toward green production process require the availability of techno-economically viable alternatives. Technology transfer and financing is the key for uptake of such technology. While Stockholm and Rotterdam Convention regulate the use and trade of listed hazardous chemical, Basel Convention regulate the movement and environmentally sound disposal of hazardous and other waste. India has recently ratified 7 persistent organic pollutants under Stockholm Convention and is updating the national implement plan for the management of POPs. For achieving environmentally sound management of waste, circular economy approach are the key. Basel Convention should support circular economy in different waste categories. Honorable Prime Minister of India has called the supporting mission of circular economy in the country. The Government of India has working to bring circularity and resource efficiency in 11 waste streams. The action plan have been prepared for these waste systems. The extended producer responsibility of e-waste and plastic waste cover the complete value chain of waste with participation of all stakeholders, including academia, civil society, and private sector. I reiterate India's commitment toward the sound management of chemical and waste and wish you all the fruitful deliberation at the upcoming joint BRS COPs. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing the experience from India and also for keeping to the time. Let me now turn to Mr. Yutaka Shoda, the Vice Minister for Global Environmental Affairs in the Ministry of Environment of Japan. Sir.
Thank you, Chair. Striving to reduce environmental impacts along entire product supply chains is vital for building a recycling-oriented economy. We recognize that the involvement of various stakeholders is necessary to transform economic structures and that cooperation among them is crucial. In this context, one area that has been receiving the most attention recently is plastics. Some plastics not suitable for recycling became newly regulated under the Basel Convention at BC COP14. Prompted by these moves in Japan, a new law, the Plastic Resource Recycling Law, was put into effect in last April. Until this law, measures will be taken to encourage resource recycling efforts by all actors throughout the plastic life cycle, from design of plastic products to the disposal of waste. Added to that, a wide range actors' cooperation is critical, from individuals to local governments, NGOs, companies, and research institutes. So now we are working to share the outstanding effort of such actors, promote collaboration among them, and foster public momentum and the slogan, using plastics wisely. As I said, revisions to the Basel Convention were one of the triggers for transforming recycling policy in Japan. We believe that the BRS conventions can prove an effective driving force for party countries to make the transition to recycling-oriented societies. In sectors other than plastics, Japan has put in place recycling legislation for home appliances and automobiles, while incorporating the idea of extended producer responsibility. By imposing certain waste disposal obligation on producers, we are aiming to clarify responsibility throughout the entire life cycle and to make effective use of resources. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your remarks on plastics and other aspects. Let me turn to His Excellency Mr. Josué Lorca, Ministro del Poder Popular para el Ecosocialismo from Venezuela.
Sí, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings from the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela on behalf of President Nicolás Maduro. Ladies and gentlemen, the inadequate use of chemical products has been one of the factors in production of dangerous waste. Our country believes that the implementation of the BRS conventions has allowed the use of chemical waste based on the implementation of national policies that have led to the adequate use of the same, respecting the processes and the life cycle of the chemicals. However, the efforts we have deployed are not necessary. It is necessary to have more financial resources for capacity building, the implementation of best practices available, as well as technology transfer from developed countries. We believe that these are highly costly for developing countries. So with this, we'll be able to fulfill the commitments in international agreements. Our country has been also facing unilateral coercive measures, which has increased the kind of pressures we are facing in implementing our agreements. There have been measures that have been taken with our own resources, highlighting the promulgation of the extended producer responsibility law and the measures to combat pollution, and something that is very important, technical roundtables and recycling roundtables for circular economy, and involving all our organizations in order to bring everybody around the theme of recycling and the cleanliness of our oceans, respecting our coasts. Our country reiterates our commitment to contribute to the implementation of the BRS conventions, which will give us an opportunity for global governance of chemicals and waste. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much for your comments. Let me now turn to His Excellency Mr. Mohamed Hassan Abdullahi, the Minister of Environment of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Sir.
Thank you very much for this very good opportunity. Let me first underscore Nigeria's commitment to the understanding of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, and to state that what we do in terms of implementation is to try and make it a national program so that it can be inclusive and the agenda to be community-driven. So as far as Nigeria is concerned, we at the national level want to achieve specific targets and goals of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development relating to sound chemicals management and waste, and indeed, particularly one other area we've overlooked is the management of medical waste. Yes, like the previous roundtable has spoken, yes, some certain chemicals are quite useful for the human race. However, their management post-usage is very hazardous to the environment. So we agree that there should be an establishment of multi-stakeholder committees to bring both government, agencies, and NGOs to a common platform for cooperation and collaboration of sound management of not only chemicals, but antioxidants. In Nigeria, what we did is to establish the National Committee on Chemicals Management and the Coordinating Committee to significantly contribute to the promotion and coordination of a coherent, coordinated, continuous, and cost-efficient approach to chemical safety and management. So the domestication of Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions and enactment of a comprehensive national legislation of some management of chemicals and waste is a national priority in terms of environmental safety. On a final note, we believe that the establishment of global standards, environment and health surveillance programs will help spur the global and effective global implementation of such waste products. I thank you very much for the little time for this contribution. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Excellency. We will have time for final intervention, but before I ask His Excellency Peb Jang-King, from the Deputy Minister of Environment of the Republic of Korea, if there are other interventions that you have wished to make, you can send written statements and they will be reflected in the record of this meeting. So please, Mr. Kim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, moderator, distinguished delegates. I'm especially pleased to be here at this high-level segment, as this is the occasion to renew our collective commitments towards the implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam, and the Stockholm Conventions. These are the three most important conventions that help countries move towards a life cycle approach. The Korean government has adopted this life cycle approach early on, laying the legal and institutional foundation for proper management of hazardous waste across their full cycle. In production stage, we have been scaling up the extended producer responsibility since its introduction in 2003. We also laid out our own circular economy action plan last year and set the target of using recycled materials at least 30% by 2030. In distribution stage, we introduced prior inspection for excessive and unnecessary packaging to avoid wasteful use of papers and plastics. The packaging requirements are imposed on the number of packaging layers and material types. Disposal is the stage we have been paying special attention to. In 2018, we started imposing disposal fees for incineration and landfilling in order to promote recycling in Korea. Recycling techniques have also developed from energy recovery to chemical recycling such as pyrolysis. We are not losing our focus on chemical management as well. In Korea, hazardous chemicals are registered at the time of manufacturing and import, and their hazards and risks are reviewed and assessed. We also have specific procedures and rules for businesses manufacturing, storing, and using chemicals. The businesses prepare chemical accident prevention plans and are subject to the rules of handling chemicals. This is the path Korea has been taking for its accelerated transition to a circular economy. I assure that Korea remained committed to the full implementation of the BRS conventions and the sound management of chemicals and waste. Korea will share its years of policy experiences and best practices with the rest of the world to lead the way for a healthy planet. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Excellency, and I would like to thank and ask you for applauding all the panelists and all the interveners in this panel session for their interesting contributions. And with that, I'm handing the floor over back to the Executive Secretary, Rolf.
Excellency Andrew Sik, thank you very much for this excellent moderation, and a big thank you to all our panelists. And I will now invite the next panel and our third and last panel for today to the podium. So if we can. So it now gives me the pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, who's the CEO, there you are, who's the CEO and chairperson of the Global Environment Facility, and he's also the former Minister of Environment and Energy from Costa Rica. Carlos Manuel, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Muy buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Rolf, for the opportunity to be here. It's a great pleasure for me to be able to chair this, the third ministerial interactive discussion on the means of implementation. Today, we will be discussing, sharing experiences on opportunities for enhancing the implementation of the chemicals conventions through the promotion of new and clean technologies and innovative approaches to financing. As we all know, addressing pollution, climate change, and biodiversity loss in an integrated manner offers win-win opportunities, optimizing limited resources and achieving multiple and accelerated solutions. Grants under the GEF have evolved over the years from multifocal areas to integrated approaches to reflect the increasing need for GEF resources to harness better integration and opportunities for generating multiple environmental benefits. We are delighted that in the last replenishment, the GEF was able to receive much more resources for chemical and waste. From JF7 to JF8, we went from $600 million to $800 million. And we should celebrate, we should congratulate, but that is not enough. The convention has indicated us that the financial needs of the parties are around $5 billion. So today, I want to promote a discussion on how we can generate higher impact, how do we maximize the limited resources under the actual circumstances and challenges. Of course, my challenge of this afternoon is to bring the better of the ministers in 3 minutes. And I will begin with His Excellency Minister Barth, Minister of Climate and Environment of Norway. Minister, we talk about the triple crisis. We talk about a holistic, systemic approach to a systemic problem. How does Norway think of being Norway so important in global cooperation? How does Norway see this systemic approach in terms of ODA? Thank you, Minister.
Well, thank you very much. Let me first, Carlos, congratulate on a good replenishment conference for the GEF. That was very welcome. And for your excellent cooperation. I think it's incredibly important that we reflect on what was said by, among others, Sherry Rehman from Pakistan, that finally climate is now on the top of the international agenda, which is great. Nature has been climate's little brother or little sister, is now coming up and up there, and I think the course of this year we will place it where it belongs as equally important as climate. And then the third planetary crisis, the pollution crisis, is actually not only equally important, but it's deeply integrated, and we can only think systemically if we understand that we have to deal with all three of them. And dealing with them often comes together, but not necessarily. So we also have to be aware that we try to solve or reduce the impact of one without exacerbating the others. So these things are deeply interconnected. And I think it's fundamentally important that we first need to use this opportunity as we've gathered in this BRS context to reflect on the fact that the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm conventions has made us safer. The world is a healthier place than if we hadn't done so. So let's reflect on that for 1 second. Now we've done that, 1 second is gone, and then we have to think of what we have to do from now on. I was very happy with the outcome of UNEA, which I had the pleasure of being the president of, where at least the 2 major decisions impact directly on our work here. The agreement to negotiate a very solid, sound plastics treaty, where we agreed that it is going to be both legally binding and source to sea, meaning we will look into the entire value chain of all aspects of plastics, which relate directly also to chemicals, because very often you have chemicals associated with plastics, and some of the hazardous elements of plastics come also from the associated hazardous chemicals. Secondly, the agreement to set up a science policy panels on chemicals and waste, because I think that if you look at the importance of the IPCC, the panel on climate change for the climate agenda, we need to have a similar solid repository of agreed knowledge on the pollution crisis. So that's going to help us. And then I think it's important to underline the weight we have to put on national action plans. We need to set common targets, some common goals, but we also really need to follow up in our national economies. And that is public sector, but also private sector. And I'm pleased to say that I'm seeing, slowly, but increasingly, the private sector is coming along and actually caring about this. They want to declare and disclose what they do, also in this area of hazardous chemicals and waste management. There's more public scrutiny, and there's more willingness to contribute to building an economy that makes it more attractive to be part of a circular, healthy, climate-friendly, nature-friendly economy than to continue with the old. So we need to continue down that line, and much of that has to do with implementing what we already said. And the last thing I want to mention is the importance of look for substitutes, that There are chemicals that are hazardous but perceived to be needed. We need to continue to prohibit and ban where we can, either prohibit directly or phase out. But we also need to invest in the developing of the alternatives, the healthier, safer, sounder alternatives. And we know that smart engineers and smart chemists and smart companies, they are aware that if we are clear as governments of what we don't want, they will speed up the work to look for what we can put instead. And then we also need to make sure that the substitutes are not harmful, that we have sort of a sound substitution. And I would really like to underline the important work we're doing in Europe, in REACH, in trying to really say that you need to demonstrate that this chemical is not hazardous before you're allowed to use it, that you turn it around rather than starting by prohibiting what we already know is unhealthy. You have to start by saying, we know it's healthy already. So just as a few opening words, that's my contribution.
Thank you so much, Minister, and congratulations for the outcome of UNEA 5, and thanks for your strong leadership in getting there. So let me pass over to Minister Hobart. He's the Minister of Agriculture, Climate Change, and Environment of Seychelles. I want to underline that you are the Minister of Agriculture, Climate, and Environment. Your country doesn't make a difference in how the country manages domesticated and wild biological resources. When I was a Minister of Environment, I was constantly politically challenged by the Minister of Agriculture and legally challenged by the chemical companies when I wanted to ban or limit the use of a chemical. So I presume, Minister, that being both the Minister of Environment and Agriculture, it helps you implement the convention. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, all colleagues and distinguished guests. First, I would like to express my gratitude to Government of Sweden and also to the Secretariat for making this meeting possible. Of course, as you have mentioned, Mr. Chair, agriculture and environment can sometimes clash, but in our case, we think it's a very, very good match because it enables us to action across sectors without the conflicts of the past. So it is something that we think can be done, and we are trying to do it at a very, very high level in Seychelles. When it comes to support for BRS and the way that we can improve the functioning and the delivery under that convention, I would like to start by saying that support and financing for the convention has to be long, because the task itself is long and arduous, and it has to also be something that is sustained over a long time. Seychelles, as you all know, sits in the Indian Ocean off the east coast of Africa. I think we all know about Seychelles in the room. And Seychelles has done quite a bit in recent times to lead when it comes to climate and biodiversity, two of the triple threats. But now we are faced with handling the third one, the three conventions under the third threat, which is pollution. And the questions that we are asking ourselves is, can't we come up with innovative financing mechanisms and support systems for those three conventions? Of course, at the local level, we have an opportunity under the Islands Project, and I welcome the decisions that have been made recently to have a better partitioning of the resources under GEF to support countries like ours to implement projects. And we think that through the Islands Project, we'll be able to actually address through a national implementation plan that covers all three areas the issues under Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm. So that's a unique opportunity for us, and we will, as we've done in the past, make very good use of it and come out, hopefully, champion. At the global level, we also think that there are a lot of opportunities for us to implement mechanisms to support the BRS execution. One of the things that we've talked about is extension of the extended producer responsibility. You know, when we talk about global companies with global footprints, we also have to talk about global responsibilities, and we have to take this seriously. Small islands like us, we suffer a lot, like my colleagues have expressed in the room, from the impact of chemicals which we don't produce. We are just consumers, but we have to take care of the after effects, and we have to take care of the waste. So there has to be better mechanisms and more mechanisms to ensure that those who are producing actually help us to take care of the waste that is produced after the materials or products have been used. Also, I would just like to wrap up. I can see that my time is up. That the recent decisions to enhance the financial mechanisms under Jeff is a very welcome move. And we would like to see more of it. We'd like to see more discussion about how we can better deal with this threat. As somebody has mentioned in the room, it's like the younger brother of the three that we have to give attention to now. So these were my points, and I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Minister, and my congratulations to your country, who's leading this charge in terms of the institutional paradigm shift. Seychelles, UK, and a handful of other countries are really thinking out of the box in terms of dealing with the lack of policy coherence, the silo and sectoral visions, and very much interest in learning on your own experiences. Now let me move over to Minister Hele, Minister of Environment and the Protection of Nature from Cameroon. Minister, welcome. We're talking here about enhancing implementation within the conventions. How do we promote new options and new technologies and innovative approaches? And when we talk about this, definitely the topic of capacity building and technology transfer is in the center of these discussions. Can you, elaborate on how your country are doing with this issue of building more capacities, using multilateral mechanisms to do that, and of course, being able to enhance the impact of what you are aiming in terms of South-South collaboration and technology transfer? Minister?
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, for giving me the floor. At the outset, I should like to thank the Swedish government for the very warm welcome we've all received. And I'm delighted, personally, to be in Stockholm. It's a fantastic city. I first visited it back in 1972 when I was a fresh-faced student, and I'm delighted to be back here. Turning our attention now to our concerns. At the outset, I should like to congratulate all of the panelists. I've been listening very closely to everything what was said, and I think they all go well for the future. We've taken stock of the reality that we're facing, and we're not doing too badly. However, the outcome is going to depend a great deal on our standpoint. What's important for us to do is see how we can implement the three conventions. Because there are some issues, there are some people who are in fact demolishing our planet through pollution. They're demolishing biodiversity. There are various solutions: capacity building, technology transfer. A number of solutions have been listed. What we now need is the wherewithal to implement the three conventions, the BRS conventions. As for my country, Cameroon, we're located at the heart of Francophone Africa.
Bien.
And when it comes to technology transfer, it's not particularly novel. In the Bali Action Plan, already technology transfer was mentioned. It's essential. And today, we're once again talking about capacity building and technology transfer. Well, how have we benefited from this process? First of all, the Regional Center for Francophone Africa, located in Dakar, has been very helpful. We've received a great deal from it. In 2016, we held a national conference on waste. And one of the outcomes of that meeting was the establishment of a waste exchange with the ultimate goal of establishing a circular economy. And this is what we're now trying to do. Taking a more global view, if we take the Stockholm Convention, for instance, we've looked at it very closely, and we believe we're on the right track. The same can be said for waste in general. But what we're lacking is probably innovative technologies, which goes hand in hand with adequate financing. Furthermore, I'd like to mention information. We need to raise awareness about the threats hanging over us. We've pinpointed the problem: pollution, climate change. But what would be worthwhile is coming up with a paradigm, a Stockholm plus 50 paradigm, because the real problems, they've been listed here, and we're now coming up with solutions. It is incumbent upon us to come up with robust solutions. It's a historic opportunity. After all, the first Stockholm conference went down in history. But we now need to move beyond that. We need to come up with solutions which are fit for purpose, the solutions we've all been after since 1972. We've talked about the planetary crises, a great deal of different things, but we need to move beyond that. A lot has already happened, but temperatures are still rising. We've all said that unless we do something, unless we change things by 2050, planet Earth, as we know it, will pretty much disappear if we take the long view. So we need to think about our children to whom we owe it to change the paradigm here at Stockholm. I think the people occupying leadership positions at the UN, at other bodies, they need to go above and beyond. Because we're close to a tipping point. Once we get past it, we can actually take action. Because I believe Stockholm was, is, and should be the platform where we can come up with excellent solutions. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Thank you very much, Minister.
Now let me go to my next panelist, which is Vice Minister Luang Saisana, Vice Minister of Natural Resources and Environment from the Laos People's Democratic Republic. Mr. Vice Minister, we were talking a few minutes ago about the challenges that your country are dealing and the innovative ways to deal with those challenges. Why don't you share it with the audience here, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, Lao PDR, it is my great pleasure to be among you today at this conference. I think it is the good opportunity for us to revisit and fine-tune our future cooperation together. Now I'd like to bring your attention to the answer to the question. The promotion of new and clean technologies and innovative approaches to financing is critical for forging effective implementation and achievement of the common goals and targets. In Lao PDR, application of this approach with large investment projects like hydropower and mining appears acceptable, although there is room for improvement. However, application of this approach to micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises and industries and other pollution sources remains a major challenge. We would need to strengthen the capacity, technical and financial, and skills of our national and subnational institutions to assist enterprises and other organizations with the effective implementation of such best available techniques and best environment practices. Convince concerned private and public sector stakeholders to access to and appropriately apply BAT and BEPs, and to substitute materials or products at reasonable cost. We also need appropriate financial incentive and disincentive mechanisms. We welcome any technical assistance and or other types of cooperation with all development partners to explore the opportunities to provide assistance to the MSME to apply best available techniques and BEPs in La PDR. This is our view, links the achievement of waste generation and persistent organic pollutants reductions through Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm conventions. As we have committed as parties to the conventions to more general efforts to foster the uptake of cleaner production technologies and practices. In conclusion, I wish to express my sincere appreciation to the government and the people of Sweden, as well as the international community and development partners for extending their cooperation and support to the Lao PDR in implementing our common endeavors over the past years. I wish everyone a great success at this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Baez, Mr. Ministers. I wish I had an opportunity to go in another round of questions, but unfortunately that is not the case for today's, and I would like to invite ministers from the floor to make their interventions. In my list, I got the Minister of Canada. Please, Minister, you have the floor. Thanks.
Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues and attendees. I'm Paul Haluk. I'm the Associate Deputy Minister for Environment and Climate Change Canada. I'm representing Minister Stephen Guilbeault this afternoon. It's an honor to participate in this important dialogue. We're facing incredible international challenges on many fronts, including the unprovoked, illegal, unjustified invasion of Ukraine, which is of great concern to Canada. These challenges make our collective efforts to address the triple crisis of pollution, climate change, and biodiversity loss more timely than ever. Because no country is immune to the risks that exposure to harmful substances pose to people and the environment. Nor can one country or government alone manage the risks or prevent the transboundary movement of harmful substances. That's why Canada is an active party to all chemicals and waste conventions, including the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. At home, the Canadian Environmental Protection Act and Canada's Chemicals Management Plan have provided a robust foundation that has successfully reduced risks to Canadians and the environment from exposure to harmful substances. And we are continuing to modernize both of those pieces of legislation. In fact, we're in the process of including the right to a healthy environment in our Environmental Protection Act, and we are also working on new legislation to fight environmental racism. Internationally, Canada is actively collaborating with our global partners, sharing scientific work, exchanging information, and working to align best practices. I will now switch to speaking in French. Mais nous savons aussi qu'il faut.
But we also know that we need to do more. We should find ways of stepping up cooperation between the treaties on biodiversity, chemicals and waste. In order to extract the benefits of this cooperation with due respect for the mandates and expertise of each and every one of those conventions. The BRS conventions, the CBD, and the UNFCCC, as well as the Paris Agreement, all have enormous potential for advancing our objectives, collective environmental objectives. The work that's been done with the private sector and civil society should ensure that there's integrated support being provided to the triple crises, and this based on an inclusive, human rights-based approach. What we also need to do is ask ourselves the following question: how can we make the most of the information and expertise that's available to promote scientific innovation for more sound management around the world? We need to step off the beaten track, and this is why Canada will be taking part in the Triple COP, the upcoming Triple COP. Canada is going to continue collaborating with its partners so as to make the most of the programs available and build a better future for us all. Thank you. Thank you very much, Canada.
Over to Minister Habet from Belize. Minister, you got the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Innovative financing is critical for the future of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. The global, regional, and national issues caused by the unsustainable use of chemicals and mismanagement of hazardous wastes are real, complex, and expensive to manage, especially for a small country like Belize, which is not a manufacturer, but rather an importer of chemicals. Over the years, we have seen many innovations that the conventions have employed to strengthen the cooperation and collaboration of countries to deliver on the mandates of the conventions. Innovations include the consolidation and harmonization of 3 conventions, the establishment of the regional centers, such as the Basel Convention Regional Center for Training and Technology Transfer for the Caribbean, the BCRC Caribbean. Through the BCRC Caribbean, Belize successfully implemented national activities under the project entitled Development and Implementation of a Sustainable Management Mechanism for Persistent Organic Pollutants in the Caribbean. The implementation of activities under this project assisted Belize tremendously in complying with the mandates of the Stockholm Convention. Presently, the BCRC Caribbean is supporting Belize in the implementation of national activities under the Jeff Islands projects for the Caribbean, which will ensure Belize complies with the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions and the Minamata Convention on Mercury when ratified by Belize. It is, however, important to note Belize is actively pursuing innovative financing via other programs, including the UNEP Special Program and the Plastic Waste Partnership to implementation of national activities, thus ensuring compliance with the BRC conventions. Additionally, while we welcome and appreciate Jeff's higher commitments, especially to small developing states, we believe that at the local, regional, and international level, producers of hazardous chemicals and waste must be held responsible for financing the research, especially for alternatives, innovative new clean technologies, and for financing the management of hazardous chemicals and waste. Recalling that we are discussing here implementation of the BRS, but not addressing the negative effects, especially in humans, as mentioned by one of the panelists from Seychelles. We must remember that all these people who are suffering from cancer, tumors, endocrine, hormonal dysfunctions, these are a burden to the local and national health system. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. Now we go to United Kingdom. Minister Goldsmith, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And thank you for chairing a fascinating discussion with the panel. earlier. Our collective failure to get on top of the global pollution crisis is putting the health of our people and the planet in peril. Pollution contributes to the causes of climate and biodiversity crises, but it also compounds the impacts, and there are feedback loops between all three. And the world's poorest and most vulnerable people, as ever, are hit hardest because they depend directly on the natural world and its ability to buffer the impacts of chemical waste, because they lack the basic protections and services that many of us take for granted, and because our profligate attitude to resources has an impact on people beyond our shores. A few weeks ago at the UN Environment Assembly, as has already been mentioned, countries agreed to start negotiating a new legally binding instrument on plastic pollution that is particularly important for the marine environment. And I would also take this opportunity to congratulate Norway for the crucial role that that country played. In the UK, we are getting our house in order, from measures in our new Environment Act to design waste out of the system, to helping people develop scalable solutions to pollution in South Africa and Vietnam, and our newly established Blue Planet Fund, helping some of the world's poorest communities protect the marine environment from plastics and chemicals. And I'm proud that the UK co-sponsored the UN resolution to create a new independent intergovernmental science policy panel by the end of next year to strengthen the management of chemicals and waste and prevent pollution, and work alongside the IPCC and the IPBES. But we also need to recognize that from keeping chemical and waste out of the environment and monitoring exceedances accurately and in real time, to using less, recycling more, and phasing out the most harmful and persistent pollutants in favor of more sustainable alternatives, we already know enough to be able to do much more than we're currently doing. So as well as implementing and enforcing the policies that are needed to ensure we comply with our obligations under the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, when we meet in Bonn, we need to mobilize the support and the cooperation that's needed to align our efforts and our resources so that we can improve the global picture in the decade ahead. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you, Minister Goldsmith. Now let me move over to Jamaica. Minister Samuda, the floor is yours. I see we don't have Jamaica in the room. Let me move over to Mexico. Vice Minister Delgado Peralta, the floor is yours. Okay, we don't have Mexico. Let me move over to Indonesia. Minister Nurbaya Bakar. Seems Indonesia is coming in a second.
Thank you very much. I'm representing the Minister of Environment and Forestry. I'm the Director General for Solid Waste Management, Hazardous Substances, and Hazardous Waste Management. Distinguished colleagues and delegates, the public-private partnership scheme is regarded as an innovative approach to closing the funding gap. Using the Indonesian government as an example, the government can encourage the private sector to collaborate in combating the issues addressed by the BRS Convention through the National Research and Innovation Agency. The government provides experts and or researchers, while the private sector contributes or provides funds. The government strategy is to answer the question, what's in it for me, that may arise in the private sector. The government must persuade the private sector of the program's benefits to the private sector, the public, and the environment. This strategy is accompanied by incentive programs such as tax relief, tax holidays, and facilities for private parties who participate in this collaboration. The role of law enforcement is a human effort to achieve the desired order. The main goal of law enforcement is to align the three pillars of legislation: law enforcement officers and community legal culture. Public legal awareness must be instilled as an embodiment of the community's legal culture in order to continuously improve public compliance with the law. This legal culture can be seen as a tradition of people's daily behavior that is in accordance with and reflects the will of the law or legal science that have been established to apply to all legal subjects in the life of the nation and states. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Indonesia. And with this, we come to an end of today's ministerial interactions discussions. Before passing it over to the Secretariat, please join me and with a big hand to our panelists, ministers. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Carlos Manuel, and thank you very much, distinguished excellencies, for this third and last panel that we have time for today, unfortunately. And I would like to thank you all for your understanding and listening attentively to the three panels. We've now reached the last session that we have for today. So, excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to first express my appreciation to all the moderators and the panelists who have taken time this afternoon to be with us and to share and exchange with us their views and reflections on the importance and, of course, linkages between chemicals and waste and the other two global planetary crises, the climate change and, of course, biodiversity loss. Unfortunately, Dr. Fouad, Minister for Egypt, has had to leave us, but I would like to invite our two moderators to join me up here for some final reactions and feedback. Before, as they settle down, I would like to first invite Ms. Anita Brea, who's the president of the International Conference on Chemicals Management, to say a few words and a message from that conference. Mrs. Brea, you have 2 minutes.
Hello? Yes, thank you very much. My name is Anita Breyer. I'm a DG General at the German Federal Ministry for the Environment and the new president of the 5th International Conference on Chemical Management to be held next year in Germany. The BRS conventions lay the ground for a life cycle approach to chemicals. They treat them as substances, as products, and as wastes. But we all know we have to go further. Under the strategic approach of integrated chemical management, we want to build on this and extend it into a broader approach. That's our task for our conference next year in Germany. We would like to see chemicals to be safe and sustainable by design. Full circularity, if possible. We see a lot of support currently for tasks ahead of us. Most of them already mentioned today. One is the Science Policy Panel on Chemicals, Pollution and Waste that was mentioned several times, decided on by UNEA. Also the plastic resolution. I also would like to add the G7 Environment Minister communique that gave a very strong signal to support us for sound management of chemicals. But I would also like to add as a strong support this wonderful discussion today. I think it all gave us a good impulse for going ahead and striving for more. Let us use this support in developing an ambitious Beyond 2020 instrument for truly sound management of chemicals. I count on your support, and I hope to see you all in Bonn next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Brea. Now I would like to invite Mr. Marco Soriano, UN Special Rapporteur on Toxics and Human Rights. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much, Executive.
If you can please stand up so the camera can capture you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rolf, Executive Secretary, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues. Today, several interventions have spoken about the need to focus on people in vulnerable situations. This is a key element of the human rights-based approach. If we look back at 1972, we can see that human rights were not absent 50 years ago. However, the legal arrangements that were adopted in the chemicals and waste cluster in the decades that followed a separate pattern. Rather than articulating the principles of transparency, participation, and accountability in order to secure the right of everyone to a non-toxic environment, these instruments addressed narrow areas of chemicals and waste management. And despite the progress that these agreements signify, they have not yet managed to reverse the toxic tide. For example, even with decades of implementation, the Basel Convention enforced illegal traffic in hazardous waste continues to cause environmental injustices. And the latent effects of toxic wastes that were dumped decades ago are causing serious public health conditions today. At the same time, the breakdown of the science policy interface in the Rotterdam Convention compromises not only the right to science, but it also weakens the effectiveness of that instrument. Moving forward, the chemicals and waste cluster should embrace fully a human rights-based approach and the principles already apparent in the 1972 Stockholm Conference. Full implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions is key to the realization of a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Oriana, and thank you very much. So now it gives me the pleasure just to quickly go through the main messages and, of course, invite our 2 moderators thereafter to give their quick reactions on anything that I may have missed. Of course, we're going to capture this in a document, but right now it's on my mobile phone here, and I'll make sure it is not deleted, but kept to convey to the next triple COPs, which will be next week as we meet to negotiate further on those 3 conventions. So we heard a lot about the relevance and importance of young people to be actively involved, and I think this is coming through even for Stockholm Plus 50 as we get and engage young people in the work that we are doing, is to elevate waste management as also a global issue or a global crisis that we need to solve. I think raising temperatures and extreme weather events also exacerbate the challenges of pollution and chemicals. There's a very strong call for PCB action, especially since we have the looming deadlines of 2025 and 2028 to completely eliminate PCBs. We need to work towards a toxic-free environment, towards this one world, one health approach, and of course, see how we can ban exportation of hazardous chemicals that are banned in the European Union. We also saw the call for enhanced coordination among the focal points of the MEAs, that is the climate change focal points with the biodiversity focal points and the chemicals and waste focal points, and indeed the GEF Council members as well. I think that's very important to have this kind of coordination and for them to talk together. The importance, this is very much for Europe, the importance of strengthening REACH legislation, adopting a life cycle approach and best available techniques and technologies and practices is much required to look at lead acid batteries and other types of batteries, transformation of waste from end of life towards contributing to economic transformation, to green jobs, to environment and social rights. We also heard about the importance of sub-regional collaboration necessary for environmentally sound management, circularity in key waste streams, understanding the environmental impact of chemicals on the environment and on supply chains, and the need for focusing also on medical waste, that we should not ignore medical waste, especially since we've come out of COVID-19. The importance of the linkages between the BRS conventions, Minamata Convention, and the Rio Conventions, the interconnections between all the different challenges that we have, environmental challenges that we have before us, the issue of plastics, plastic additives, the challenges that we have in looking at plastics. We saw also we heard about the innovative financing systems that we need to have, the Islands project of the GEF, the global responsibilities of companies, extended producer responsibilities, and of course, looking at how we can work with people, work with consumers in establishing the issue of waste within a circular economy, looking at innovative technologies, working together with innovative financing, and of course a call for Stockholm 50 plus 50 to be this paradigm shift in order for us to move forward with really robust solutions. And we need to include SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises in pollution control, support SMEs. We need to ensure that countries come and ratify all these chemical conventions so that together we can address the issues of pollution and how we can make use of best available information. And of course, the issue of looking at the entire value chain, the importance of alternatives, how agriculture and environment can work together at the highest level, and of course, how we can enhance existing financial mechanisms to really address some of the pollution issues that we have. Of course, my staff have picked up a lot more, but this is just a summary that we've gathered from the 3 sessions that we have this afternoon. So I'd like to ask my 2 distinguished moderators to give us just a 2-minute feedback from your perspective, whether we've covered the points and maybe add any additional points that you may have from where you're sitting. Thank you. Please.
Yes, thank you very much. I can start with my thoughts, and I think you captured very well many important points which are raised today. 3 messages that I would maybe highlight. One is that what we need is to look at the synergies and integration both horizontally and vertically. Horizontally in terms of the different instruments, of course, Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm at the center, but also with all the other instruments that either deal with the chemicals, such as Minamata or the future plastic convention, or biodiversity, climate change, etc. So really looking across what things work and how they can inform the implementation to be even better. Vertically, in between the global level and the national and subnational level, really being able to see what good practices can be brought to the international scale and how the global instruments through also regional cooperation can inform the national implementation. That would be my first point. Second, the human dimension was mentioned a number of times, very important, both as part of the problem in a way that the paradigm shift and the way how we are part of creating the challenge with the chemicals around us, but also in terms of the impact that it has on the human health and human well-being, in particular with vulnerable people. Third point I would highlight is that we have a lot of information, we have a lot of science, we need to be mindful of that, how to best use that scientific advice in taking informed decisions. And again, that goes both for national level implementation and also for the future action of the conventions. these would be my takeaways, and thank you very much for inviting me here.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Carlos Manuel.
So two things, Rolf, for me are very evident. That one, even though it was not explicitly mentioned by any of the ministers, it was intrinsic in every single statement by the ministers, which is the fact that I see a change, a major change in terms of more integration across all conventions, beyond Rio. You know, last year, UNFCCC COP26, I didn't know if I was in a COP, in a climate COP or a biodiversity COP. And I've been a climate negotiator, I've been a CBD negotiator for Costa Rica. I felt I was kind of a double agent. I didn't know where I was, which was great. And then, you know, a couple of weeks ago, I was in the UNCCD COP. I never felt I was in a desertification land. I felt I was in a COP that was dealing with landscape issues. And when I see what is happening at the COPs, and what I went to the replenishment of the GEF, everything is moving towards more integration. In the GEF, we went through this very interesting political challenge of having donors competing with priorities. More biodiversity, more climate, but yes, more effort on chemicals. So we are, Rolf, I think we are really moving towards more integration. And it was great doing the GEF replenishment, talking about the impact of chemicals in nature. And this is happening here as well. So we are moving towards more integration, towards more coherence, and that's one key topic that was evident to me today. And the second one is that I'm very grateful with the work that you have done in the Secretariat of the Convention and being able to assess the financial needs of the parties. If we don't work understanding what are the financial needs, how big is the global gap, how do we go to the country level and understand what are the financial challenges? Because at the end of the day, the GEF can be 3, 4, 10 times bigger. That will not be enough to really fulfill the expectation of all parties in the conventions. We need to understand that the GEF resources and many other resources should be catalyzers of political processes at the country level. So I think that what you all have been doing in the convention in really putting the financial information, the financial needs will help us at the GEF to be more and more strategic in how do we do enabling investment at the country level so we can mobilize financial resources from all sources and be able to be on track with the multiple targets that we have just around the corner. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Carlos Manuel, for those thoughts. Unfortunately, we've reached the end of our time here, and I have to move to the closing. And once again, I apologize to all delegations who have not been able to take the floor today. As you know, it's been very challenging trying to juggle 3 hours and allowing maximum participation by ministers and by heads of delegations. But I hope this has been really useful. And now I'd like to invite Ms. Karen Schiniberger to join me on the stage, where I will hand her, sorry, I will not give you my mobile, but I will hand you my mobile, which contains the key messages, and just symbolically, and then I'll take it back.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Kind of you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I will give it back to you again.
Thank you very much. And we will convey to your office the copy of the messages. And now I invite you for closing remarks as host of the COPs, which will be held next week in Geneva. Madam, you have the
Thank
floor.
you very much. Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here at the concluding session of the high-level segment of the meetings of the conferences of the parties to the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm conventions. I would like to begin by thanking you, Your Excellencies, and all the high-level representatives for your leadership during the ministerial discussions. The main purpose of this meeting was to explore opportunities for tackling the three planetary crises: pollution, climate change, and biodiversity loss, through the implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. The key messages that result from these rich and interactive discussions prove that the international community is committed to the objectives of the three conventions, which are to protect human health and the environment from the adverse effects of chemicals and wastes. The government of Switzerland, in its role of host of the face-to-face segment of the conferences of the parties to the BRS conventions, acknowledges and supports these key messages. We assure you that they will be conveyed to the delegations negotiating the future of these conventions next week in Geneva. The COPs will provide the opportunity to translate key messages from this panel into concrete actions. The parties to the Basel Convention have the chance to proactively address the growing e-waste challenge. By adopting the proposed e-waste amendment, we can make a significant step to control the transboundary movements of e-waste, increase the part that is treated in a sound manner, and contribute to a better protection of the human health and the environment. The BRS COPs are a concrete opportunity to take political action based on scientific assessment. In the context of the Rotterdam Convention, the COP can do this by following the recommendations made by the Chemicals Review Committee and list the chemicals that fulfill the criteria outlined in the Convention. Some of them have been recommended for far too long without the COP taking the appropriate actions to list them. The pressing challenges in the field of chemicals, waste and pollution can be addressed most effectively through joint efforts by the conventions and other pertinent institutions. The synergetic institutional strength located in Geneva should be increased further. By the same token, we hope that the awareness raised during the ministerial discussions on the interlinkages between chemicals and waste pollution, climate change and biodiversity will result in the strengthened political support for the implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions. It has been an honor to work with you, and I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and we look forward to seeing you next week in Geneva. Thank you. We are now coming to the end of the high-level segment of the meetings of the Conference of the Parties, the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Convention, but this is merely an adjournment. Sorry, I'm reading you.
Yes, I noticed.
I will now hand over to the President of the Conference of the Parties to the Basel Convention, Ms. Sevija Nora Kalnins, to adjourn this high-level segment of the meeting on behalf of the other two presidents of Rotterdam and Basel, respectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Rolf. Yes, we are now coming to the end of the high-level segment of the meetings of the Conference of the Parties to the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. This is, however, merely an adjournment until the meetings resume once more in just a few days' time in person in Geneva. There will be a report made to the plenary at the face-to-face segment of the meetings of the conferences of the parties on the outcomes of the high-level segment. We have had a rich exchange of views, experience, and other information relating to different aspects related to the conventions, which hopefully will enrich not only the discussions at the face-to-face segment of the meetings, but also implementation of the conventions as we all head home. We will therefore adjourn the meetings until 6 June, and I thank you very much for your active participation and valuable contributions. As my colleagues and I will continue working during the COPs on Monday, I know it is very important for us to feel that our ministers, you, have our backs. The discussions you have had here and the importance you have placed on the issues we will be working on next week will give us sound momentum. Thank you all for the commitment you show in tackling the challenges that we have. Global agreements for a healthy planet was the theme for our gathering, and it is the task for us to continue securing that health through our combined efforts on the global level to build upon those accomplishments and contributions that we conduct on the national level. And now I'm going to be using this gavel very soon. But before that, I would like to make sure that you don't leave after I hit the gavel. But please be prepared to come towards the stage so that we can all have, with the high-level segment participants, we can have a picture taken. So now, I declare the 10th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Stockholm Convention adjourned. On behalf of my... Thank you. And on behalf of my dear fellow presidents who are not here today, I would also declare the 10th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Rotterdam Convention and the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Basel Convention adjourned.
Okay, can I please invite ministers, excellencies to please join us up here on the podium for a souvenir photo? Thank you.